Welcome back to the course on International Business Communication. Today we'll go a little faster than usual. I have lots of fun things for you. I will share some very interesting things about communication rules with you. We'll talk about rules of communication. Sounds painful, but it's not. So let's get into it. And before we do so, as usual, let's revise a little bit. I'd like you to discuss what communication is. Why do we communicate? What are the different channels we use to communicate? How do we choose when to speak and when to remain silent? How do we choose what kinds of behaviors we should be having when we talk? What kind of verbal and non-verbal signals should we be giving out? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of listening? We've talked about listening. So I would really like you to discuss what the advantages and disadvantages of listening are. And once you've done that in class, then we can start talking about communication rules. We've been talking about what communication is, what it can do, why should we communicate. Today we will talk about how we should communicate. And you'll say, what is the big deal about it? I know how to communicate. I've been doing that since I was born. I've been sending out signals. I know what works, what doesn't. But every time very experienced communicators go into new situations, everybody faces problems. All of us get confused, all of us fumble, just the way I fumble occasionally in this course. I like to think that I know a lot about communication. I've been studying it for more than 12 years now, but I still get confused, and it is not the confusion, it is lots of other things that have been happening around, lots of disturbances. So how do I decide what is the most appropriate way of saying things to you is? How do I decide what the most appropriate way of sharing whatever I'm sharing with you through this portal with the regular students in class who can actually pinpoint things and ask me questions there and then is? And that is what this whole session is all about. How do we communicate and what determines the appropriateness of communication? That is the key word for today's discussion. This lecture will discuss the ways in which we can determine the appropriateness of messages in specific situations. How do we decide what is appropriate, what is not? How do we decide what to say when? How do we decide on the pronunciation of words? How do we decide what word will mean what kind of word, which word will mean what in what kind of situation? All of those things. So let's get into it, and you'll get more detail and clarity as we move along. Okay, some examples of communication in a typical organization. I scanned this picture from this very nice book on business communication design by Pamela Angel, and I thought I would share this with you. People in an organization talk about various things. We talk about teamwork, we talk about purchasing, schedules, we have resources, we have customer satisfaction, all of that stuff. So all this discussion goes on between two people or more people. And backtracking a little bit, we'll talk a little bit about dyadic communication. In one of the previous lectures, I was trying to explain to you what we meant by hierarchical communication. I did not use the term, but I told you when we talk to somebody, we tell them, when we are discussing things with them, we find out in and through communication, in and through what we say, how we say things, we somehow get a sense of who is at a higher level and who is at a lower level in the communication process. For example, if I have more information than you and you want that kind of information, I will be here and you will be here. Again, not in my mind, it is just a perception. This person right here is not really in a better bargaining position, and I'm sure you've studied that in your classes on marketing and negotiations and other stuff, and you've seen this also. A person who needs something is perceived to be at a lower hierarchical level in the mind, or at a more let's not use the word hierarchical, at a position of disadvantage as compared to a person who has more information to share. The same thing happens in communication. It is the content and relational control aspect of the exchange of the said message, which means that when we are talking to each other, one is the position of advantage and disadvantage, the other is that a person in a position of advantage, by way of having more information that this person needs, has more control over this whole situation. So, if this person has some information that this person needs and the person up here does not want to share the information with this person, but this person really needs the information that this person at a higher level has, or this specific information that the person up here has, the person up here has a higher control over the whole situation. Your teachers, I claim to have more information about communication. I claim to have more knowledge about communication than the people who are sitting there and listening to the lecture. Of course, not the faculty who are reviewing this lecture, but the students who are listening to this lecture probably do not have the amount of information that I have, and because of that I am in a more in a position of more control than the people who have lesser information. I can choose what kind of information to give you, how much information to give you, how much not to give you. That is in my hands, and if I choose not to share all the information I have with you, there is no way that you can actually get that information out of me. So, that is what happens in the complementary interaction. Somebody up here has some information, somebody up here has some information, and this person is just complementing. By the way, what is the status of that memo you are writing for me? Is it ready to go out? Yes, it is done and ready for your review. I submit to your having this advantage over me. That is what this person up down here is saying. Symmetrical interaction is, the manager says, by the way, the manager says, by the way, what is the status of that memo you are writing for me? Is it ready to go out? And I come up here and say, of course it is. Are you actually ready to read it? So, I have come up here. You are asking me a question. I have more information. Yes, it is, but are you going to read it or not? So, I come up, and this is symmetrical. I am talking to you on the same level, and this is what happens in dyadic communication. And to negotiate these levels of communication, we need to follow certain rules and decide what is appropriate and what is not, and then send out messages accordingly. The nature of language is symbolic. We use symbols to interact with each other. We use different signals to interact with each other. As you saw in that clip about Helen Keller, her system of symbols was very different from the system of symbols we normally use. She was born with all her faculties functioning, and then she became sick, and at a very early age, while she was still an infant, she lost her sight and hearing, two very, very important channels of the reception, for the reception of different signals coming at us from our environments. And so, she did learn to communicate, but what she used for communication was different. The way she said the same words we say was different, and the way she learned to say them was different. When we say something, we hear it in our heads before we speak it out. That is the role of intrapersonal communication in our interactions. I am talking about that in communication rules is, the reason for that is that we get a chance to verify whatever we are saying by way of hearing it first. When we write something, we read it on paper before we send it out. We practice in our heads, then we write it down, and we have a chance to revise it. And so, we do it symbolically. What does this mean to me? Okay, it is subjective. We interpret it in different contexts. It is rule governed. And today I will not talk very much. I will show you very interesting examples from different movies. This is a video clip that has been downloaded from YouTube, and I would like you to listen to it, enjoy it, and maybe we can talk about it in one of the later sessions or in this session if we have time. But phonological rules govern how sounds are combined to form words. Whatever I'm saying could be something, could be just noise to somebody who does not understand English, could be noise to somebody who is not familiar with the kind of accent I'm using. But for somebody who understands the accent, who understands the language, whatever I'm saying hopefully means something, and hopefully is something that they can use. Okay, let's get to this clip. Please listen to this very carefully. It's all about how you listen to these words. And thanks to the creators for making this clip. It was on YouTube. I wish I knew who the creators were.
Hey, thanks for coming out on such short notice, guys. I can't believe you're making me do this.
I'm not making you do anything. I just said I didn't get it.
Didn't get it? It's quite possibly the single most important sketch in North American comedy.
Look, it's just that...
It doesn't matter. We're here now. You see that guy?
Which guy?
The guy on first.
Yes.
What's his name?
Who?
The guy on first base.
Yes. Who?
No, not yes, who. Him.
Who?
Exactly. Moving on. Second base.
Okay.
Who's on second?
What?
Correct. Now third base.
No, wait a sec. You just said who was on first.
Who is on first?
That's what I thought, but now you just said who was on second.
No, what is on second?
A second baseman.
Yes, and his name is...
What?
And his name is...
That's his name.
No, that is not his name. What is his name?
What?
Exactly. God, it's like talking to a wall. Okay, third base. His name is?
I don't know.
Well, take a guess.
No, that's his name.
No, that isn't his name. No one here is named that. I'm asking you what his name is.
I thought what was his name?
What is his name? I'm asking you who's on third.
Okay, I think I'm lost here, because you just said who was on first.
Oh, okay. Once more from the top. Hey, first base.
Yeah?
What's your name?
No?
What?
Yes?
I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to him.
Who?
I don't know.
Yeah?
Shut up.
Who? Yeah? Tell him your name!
Who? You, dumbass. What's your name?
I think you're a little confused, buddy. What is his name?
I know his name.
Hey, why are we doing this again?
Because.
Yeah!
Tell him why we're doing this again.
To eliminate confusion. Is it working?
I don't know.
Yeah?
Shut up. Okay, once more before I kill somebody.
Hey, what is that guy way out over there?
The left fielder? Oh, his name is Y.
Why?
I don't know.
Yeah?
Shut up.
I thought that was his name.
That is not his name. Y is his name.
Why is his name what?
It isn't. His name is what?
Okay, who? You know what? I think I'll just Google it.
Yeah, that's probably better. We'll take a brain break. We'll come back. We'll sort it out tomorrow.
Me?
Huh?
Me? Tomorrow? You talking to me?
I don't know.
Yeah?
Okay, on that note, let's get back to our boring theoretical knowledge. Think about this, play the clip again, figure out what the names of these different people were, and figure out how phonological rules on the one hand can be very, very insightful, can help us figure out what people are, I mean, not really insightful, they are very useful. On the other hand, they can create some problems also, and that's what we saw in this clip. Okay, syntactic rules govern the way symbols can be arranged. How should you talk to people? Where should the words be placed in relation to each other? How you should integrate verbal and non-verbal signals is also part of the syntax of communication. And pragmatic rules tell us what uses and interpretations of a message are appropriate in a given context. I'll give you examples for all of these and I will let you work your way through. We'll just see an example of pragmatic rules in a second. Coordinated management of meaning is when we use rules at several levels to create our own messages and interpret others' statements. So we decide, we manage the meaning at various levels. And let's go on to the pragmatic rules, and then I will share a series of clips with you, and I would like you to discuss these things in class and figure out and find examples for each of the things we have just discussed. Okay, pragmatic rules. Again, no offense to anyone. My disclaimer here: I'm not taking a I'm not poking fun at anyone. I observe human behavior. So my sincerest apologies if anyone here is offended. These are just things we see. I'm not trying to stereotype anyone. We just have these observations in our environment, and that's why I'm not going to take names of any cities or any people. I'll just give you some categories of people. Okay, this is with specific reference to Indian men and women in the age group of say 25 to 35. Again, my personal observation, it's very likely that what I'm saying may be applicable to other cultures also. Okay, let's take the example of two people who are having a conversation with each other. A male boss, let's look at the last part, the last left bottom left hand corner cell. The cultural archetype is the cultural norms that shape members' perceptions and actions, and in relation to that, let me tell you, the boss is apparently a man in his mid 30s, 33, 34 years old, belongs to a regular middle class family, has been to good schools, good colleges, belongs to a very liberal, open minded, couldn't care less type of city. Studied in slightly above average schools in India and then went abroad, got a fancy MBA from a very nice, very well reputed college, went on a scholarship, comes back and has started making a mark and is now apparently the vice president in an organization, let's say. Doing pretty well professionally, struggled, and now is enjoying the fruits of his labor. Unmarried, handsome. The female, good looking woman from a slightly more conservative town, belongs to, or not town but medium sized city, but much more conservative than the city this person is, the boss is from. She's in her, let's say, late 20s, 26, 27 years old. Has been a good student throughout, but has been told right from the time she was born that she will have to go and settle down in somebody else's home as their wife. Being a wife is her primary responsibility. Doing well in her career is a secondary responsibility. So her home comes first. She has to get married into a good family, and she's used her education to push herself forward, and she has been able to evade marriage till now. And now her now she's in this big city where the boss is located. Parents have reluctantly sent her, but I've told her to make sure that the family values are not affected in any way, to keep her value system intact. She's very good looking, very hard working, brilliant woman, did well at school, but still is part of that mindset. Okay, so that is the cultural archetype, and this is something that has shaped their own actions and perceptions of other people within their own context about them, and their perceptions about other people in other environments. Let's look at the interaction, the content, the actual words. The boss says, "You look very pretty today." Boss meets this woman in the corridor. She's wearing a pretty dress, brand new dress, and she's looking really nice, and the boss just casually remarks, "Oh, you look very pretty today." The speech act, the perceived intent of a statement. From the boss's angle, he is just complimenting an employee. He says, he looks at a pretty girl, he says, "You're pretty." The employee, who's a female, is confused. Good morning, hello are accepted greetings. "You look very pretty today." What is the intention behind it? What is going on? And the wheels start moving in her head. Why did he say this to me? Do I not look pretty on other days? Or is there something else going on? Relational contract is the perceived relationship between communicators. From the boss's side, again these two columns indicate the different perceptions of these two people. The boss perceives the relationship between himself and his employees as a friendly relationship in addition to a working relationship. Yes, we are responsible for doing things, we are interdependent, we do things together as a team, but in addition to that, you're all like my family, you're all like my friends, buddies, and we should be nice to each other even outside of work. We can have casual conversations. The employee, and of course there's no senior junior because I've lived in a more open environment, so let's not make this organization a vertical organization, and that is what the boss may be thinking, or he's probably thinking. Let's assume that he is. The woman, on the other hand, is a subordinate employee, so she sees, anyway she sees the boss at a higher level of hierarchy. I'm here in any case, I'm junior, the boss is senior, my promotion depends on him, my ability to move forward in my career depends on him, and it depends not only on my work, it also depends on what he perceives me to be like. So and I'm junior to him, and so I am at a position of disadvantage. The boss thinks that both these people are equal. Yes, we are codependent, we are interdependent, but I am not going to shout at this person if she doesn't do something wrong. I am not going to treat her like dirt, but this woman thinks that she is right here. So you see the differences now becoming more and more glaring. Okay, that is the relational contract. The episode is the situation in which the interaction occurs. From the boss's side, he's up here, it's just a casual conversation, there's no up or down. The woman thinks, he has never said anything nice to me, or he rarely makes such comments. He's usually wrapped up in his work, he's on his cell phone. He sees me wearing this pretty dress. What is he trying to do? He's a handsome guy in his mid-30s, the ideal possible match. I have to get married. Is he hitting at me? Maybe yes, and wedding bells. Ting, 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 ting going on in her head. Or if he's known to be a flirt, my God, I am another one on his list. So she thinks, oh my God, what is happening? And this is where things start changing. Life script is the self-concept of each communicator. What the person thinks about himself or herself. The boss thinks, I'm just a friendly guy. Everybody is nice to me. I'm nice to everyone. And as long as I'm nice to everyone, my life is going to be very comfortable. Now, this woman is from a slightly more conservative city where rules are very strict. You don't talk to people of the opposite gender, especially if they are in that risky bracket. You don't talk to people of the opposite gender, especially if they are in that risk zone where the risk zone at this point is men who might be taking or who could possibly take advantage of her because they know that she is in her late 20s, so really over the hill as far as her family is concerned. Her family must be desperate to get her married to a good match, and she is possibly available, and we can just flirt with her. And so that is what she's thinking about the boss. I'm not saying the boss is thinking this about her, but that is what she has been trained to think about this whole situation. And she says, no way, if I'm going to be one of the women on his list, I will have to do something about it. I need to succeed on my own merits. I have never done anything wrong. I have never done anything I can't share with my family, and so I am going to succeed on my own merits. Today is fine. Let me see what he does next. And so the pattern, the path for the pattern has already sort of, he's already on that path where she's going to look for a pattern even if there is no pattern. And these are some of the contents of or some of the aspects of pragmatic rules that we really need to start thinking about. When we are in a situation, we need to figure out what we are saying, what our intention is, and what the perceived intention, what do we perceive about the intention of the person receiving our message, and what does the person receiving our message perceive about our intent. The relational contract. How do we perceive the relationship between ourselves, and how does the person receiving our message perceives the relationship we have with him or her? Life script. where am I coming from? What is my context? What is my situation? Why am I thinking the way I'm thinking? What are the cultural norms that govern what I think about myself? And these are the rules that help us figure out or get some sense of our context in relation to the context of the receiver. And these are the rules. If we follow, if we just think about these things, there are no rules. These are the aspects of pragmatic rules. If we think about different aspects, content, speech act, relational contract, episode, life script, and cultural archetype, my own and these aspects in relation to the person I'm talking to, it will be easier for me to draft a message that is really tuned to address these differences in contexts. Before we move on to the rest of the rules, I would like to share okay, let's talk a little bit about some more communication rules. So these are the pragmatic rules. We have content rules, which is the meanings that people will attribute to symbols or what a word will count for, and procedural rules, which is how the speaker will carry out the communication event, who will communicate first, how much communication may occur, etc. So let's watch a series of clips. Please bear with me. I'll have to move the slides. I'm not going to show you the whole movie. I'm still waiting for permission to use this movie in this video, but it's just a series of 3 clips, and I want you to notice the differences in the manner in these different clips between conversations between these 2 people. The Queen is an Oscar-winning movie, and I would urge you to see it yourself. We'll be using some parts of it at different points in this course. I'm really, I think this is a very useful movie, in addition to being a very interesting movie also. Okay. And before we start, I would like to let you know that this, some idea about the context. This movie is a fictional account of Tony Blair's relationship with the British royal family around the time of Princess Diana's death. So you get an idea of the context, and let's begin.
The Prime Minister's on his way, ma'am.
To be, Robin. Prime Minister to be. I haven't asked him yet. It's a hard one to read, isn't it?
Yes. On the one hand, his background is quite establishment. Father a conservative, educated at Fetters, where he was tutored by the same man as the Prince of Wales.
Well, we'll try not to hold that against him.
On the other, his manifesto promises the most radical modernisation and shake-up of the Constitution in 300 years.
Oh, do you think he's going to try and modernise us?
Well, I wouldn't put it past him. He's married to a woman with known anti-monarchist sympathies. You may remember her curtsy the first time we met. It could best be described as shallow.
I don't measure the depth of a curtsy, Robin. I leave that to my sister.
And the atmosphere at Downing Street is expected to be very informal. Everyone on first-name terms, at the Prime Minister's insistence.
What, as in call me Tony?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I don't like that. Have we sent him a protocol sheet?
Funny, I'm actually rather nervous.
Why? You met her often enough before.
I know, but never one-to-one. And never as Prime Minister.
Well, just remember, you're a man that's just been elected by the whole nation.
But she's still, a queen.
The audience is upstairs.
When we reach the audience room, I will knock. We will not wait to be called, we shall go straight inside. Standing by the door, we bow from the neck. I will introduce you. The Queen will extend her hand. You go to her, bow again, then shake her hand. Couple of other things. It's ma'am as in ham, not ma'am as in farm. And when you're in the presence, at no point must you show your back.
The presents.
Yes, sir. That's what it's called when you're in Her Majesty's company. Would you like to sit there, Mrs. Blair?
Nice to see you again, Mr. Blair. And congratulations. Children must be very proud.
I hope so.
You've 3, haven't you?
That's right.
Oh, how lovely. Such a blessing, children. Please do sit down.
Thank you.
Have we shown you how to start a nuclear war yet?
No.
Oh, first thing we do, apparently. Then we take away your passport and spend the rest of the time sending you around the world.
You obviously know my job better than I do.
Yes, well, you are my 10th Prime Minister, Mr. Blair. My first, of course, was Winston Churchill. He sat in your chair in frock coat and top hat. He was kind enough to give a shy young girl like me quite an education.
I can imagine.
With time, one has hopefully added experience to that education and a little wisdom, better enabling us to execute our constitutional responsibility. To advise, guide, and warn the government of the day.
Advice which I look forward to receiving.
Yes, we'll save that for our weekly meetings. If there's nothing else, I believe we have some business to attend to.
Of course. Your Majesty, my party has won the election, and so I come now to ask your permission to form a
No,
government.
Mr. Blair. Mr. Blair, I asked the question. The duty falls upon me as your sovereign to invite you to become Prime Minister and to form a government in my name. And if you agree, the custom is to say yes.
Yes.
Mrs. Blair, lovely to see you again. And congratulations. You must be very proud.
Yes.
And exhausted, I imagine. Where will you be spending the summer?
Oh, France.
Oh, lovely.
You'll be in Balmoral, I expect.
Yes, yes, I can't wait. It's a wonderful place. You know, my great-great-grandmother Victoria said of it, in Balmoral all seems to breathe freedom and peace and make one forget the world and its sad turmoils.
Your Majesty.
Oh, excuse me. Yes, of course. I'm so sorry, we're going to have to leave it there. Not too short, was it? 15 minutes. One doesn't want to be rude.
No.
Okay, and watch this clip and think about what just happened and how these rules were very explicitly defined, because this was the first meeting of that Tony Blair had with the Queen after being elected as Prime Minister. So after this, let's see some more clips and I'll give you the context. Again, I'm probably sharing the whole movie with you. Lots of you may have seen it already, but Princess Diana has died in an accident, and this is a conversation that Tony Blair has with the Queen regarding that accident after her death.
Tea. Mr. General, the Prime Minister wishes to speak to Her Majesty.
Ma'am, apparently the Prime Minister is on the phone for you.
Tell him to call back.
No, it's all right, I'll take it. Prime Minister?
Good morning, Your Majesty. Sorry to disturb, but I was just wondering whether you'd seen any of today's papers.
We've managed to look at one or two, yes.
In which case, my whether you felt some kind of response might be necessary.
No. I believe a few over-eager editors are doing their best to sell newspapers, and it would be a mistake to dance to their tune.
Under normal circumstances, I would agree. But, well, my advisors have been taking the temperature among people on the streets. And well, the information I'm getting is that the mood is quite delicate.
So, what would you suggest, Prime Minister? Some kind of a statement?
No, ma'am. I believe the moment for statements has passed. I would suggest flying the flag at half-mast above Buckingham Palace. And coming down to London, the earliest opportunity. It would be a great comfort to your people and would help them with their grief.
There. Grief. If you imagine I'm going to drop everything and come down to London before I attend to my grandchildren who've just lost their mother, then you're mistaken. I doubt there is anyone who knows the British people more than I do, Mr. Blair, nor who has greater faith in their wisdom and judgment. And it is my belief that they will any moment reject this mood, which is being stirred up by the press, in favor of a period of restrained grief and sober private mourning. That's the way we do things in this country. Quietly, with dignity. It's what the rest of the world has always admired us for.
If that's your decision, ma'am, of course the government will support it. Let's keep in touch.
Yes, let's.
Okay, I want you to think about what you just saw, how the interaction started, how it progressed, and who ended the conversation and how the conversation was ended. And I would like you to watch the last clip in this series and then figure out and discuss amongst yourselves how the interaction changed and how these rules of communication, how these procedural rules were modified. And I'll just give you the categories and I'll let you decide this for yourselves. So give me half a minute, maybe a few seconds to just move the slide to the actual point that I would like to share with you. Now Tony Blair has come to meet the Queen, and so let's see what happens.
Prime Minister, Your Majesty.
You sit down.
Good to see you again. After what's been quite a summer. I'm referring to your visit to India and Pakistan, where your comments on ending historic disagreements went down very well. On the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, I spoke to the Prime Minister of Malawi, and he was saying how much he appreciated your tough stance on Nigeria. I meant to tell you at the time, but you were being monopolised, rather. I imagine those occasions must be quite difficult. 24 heads of government, each clamouring for a private audience. Also, we haven't had a chance to speak since that week. And I wanted to offer my apologies.
Whatever for?
In case you felt manhandled or managed in any way.
No, not at all. I don't think I shall ever understand what happened this summer.
Well, the circumstances were exceptional, ma'am. And in the end, you showed great personal strength, courage, and humility.
You're confusing humility with humiliation.
That's not true.
You didn't read the cards on the flowers outside the palace that Friday.
I actually think history will show it was a good week for you.
And an even better one for you, Mr. Blair.
But there are 52 weeks in the year, ma'am. 2,500 in the time since you've been queen. And when people come to assess your legacy, they won't remember those few days.
Oh, really? You don't think that what affection people once had for this institution has been diminished?
No, not at all. You're more respected now than ever.
I gather some of your closest advisors were less fulsome in their support.
One or two. But as a leader, I could never have added my voice to that chorus.
Because you saw those headlines and you thought one day that might happen to me. And it will, Mr. Blair. Quite suddenly and without warning. So, shall we get on with the business in hand? Oh, look. Oh, I do love this time of day. Shall we walk while there's still light? You know the clocks go back next week. It'll be dark before 5. But I do hope you're a walker.
I am.
Good. I always think these meetings have a far greater chance of success if the Prime Minister is a walker. As a matter of fact, it's how I think best on my feet. You know, I've never been one for sitting around endlessly. Good walk and fresh air sorts everything out. One in 4, you said, wanted to get rid of me.
For about half an hour. But then you came down to London and all that went away.
I've never been hated like that before.
That must have been difficult.
Yes. Very. Nowadays, people want glamour and tears, the grand performance. I'm not very good at that. I never have been. I prefer to keep my feelings to myself. And foolishly, I believed that was what the people wanted from their queen. Not to make a fuss, nor wear one's heart on one's sleeve. Duty first, self second. That's how I was brought up. That's all I've ever known.
You were so young when you became queen.
Well, yes. Yes, a girl. But I can see that the world has changed. And one must modernize.
Well, perhaps that's where I can help.
Oh. Don't get ahead of yourself, Prime Minister. Remember, I am the one supposed to be advising you.
Okay.
So, tell me, Mr. Blair, what might you expect from your first Parliament?
All right. I wish we could watch the whole movie, but that is beyond the scope of this lecture. But I just wanted you to see the differences in the non-verbal and verbal signals, verbal and non-verbal communication that was being exchanged, verbal and non-verbal messages that were being exchanged between the Queen, who is obviously very high up, and her Prime Minister, who's right here, and then starts slowly coming up. And in the interaction, there are some times when he is talking on an equal footing with the Queen. And of course, she reminds him, I'm still the Queen and I'm the one who's supposed to be advising you. So don't forget where I am. But he still takes the liberty towards the end to come up to her level and talk to her. At the same level as a friend, he's telling her, various points in the conversation. I'm sure you'll be able to discuss this and figure this out yourselves. But let's quickly go over the topics or some of the things that we must be careful about in our communication with people. some of the things that we subconsciously decide. Procedural rules specifically, who initiates the interactions, who starts the conversation, how do you treat delays, how do you treat the late communication. And this not only applies to verbal communication, it applies to a combination of verbal and non-verbal and written and digital communication. Depending, communication never happens in isolation. You can't just be having a verbal conversation or an oral conversation. You saw these differences in these 3 clips. In the first clip, they met. In the second clip, it was apparently only an oral verbal communication. She could just hear him. She couldn't see what he was doing. She couldn't see where he was. He couldn't see the pain on her face when she was talking about the death of her, of the mother of her grandchildren, as she put it. Apparently, Princess Diana was divorced at that point, and she was no longer HRH, Her Royal Highness. At that point, she was no longer the wife of the Queen's son. She was no longer the Queen's daughter-in-law. So she says, but she's still the mother of my children, my grandchildren. And so there was a considerable amount of emotion that the Queen could portray when she was not talking directly or when she was not face to face with somebody who was professionally junior to her. Okay, so she's here, this person is here, she doesn't have to share her emotions with him, but she does that in the last clip. She's become more comfortable in her interactions with the Prime Minister, and she takes the liberty of sharing her feelings and emotions with the Prime Minister when she says, I've never been hated so much before, it makes me sad. And you can see the tears welling up in her eyes, you can see the sadness on her face that she has not been able to show till that point or share till that point with this new man who has formed a government and who's immediately junior to her in that hierarchy. Who decides what to say? Who decides how to say things? How do you handle topic changes? How do you handle outside interruptions? In the first clip, there was an interruption. It was of course planned, as you can make out. How do you terminate interactions? In the second clip, Tony Blair says, let's stay in touch, and she says, yes, let's, and puts down the phone. That is not how you would end a conversation with somebody who was in a higher level of hierarchy than you were. But she says, yes, let's, and just ends the conversation there and then. There's no tapering off the conversation. What happens in India or in very high context cultures, you've heard about, you've learned intercultural communication, so you would know the difference between high and low context cultures, and you know that in high context cultures, conversations taper off. We take half an hour to 45 minutes to say goodbye to somebody and see them off at the door. We invite people for dinner, and depending on our level of comfort with them, the goodbye is, okay, bye, talk to you later, give my love to your kids, give my regards to your parents. All that just goes on. It goes on the phone, it goes on our chat messages, it goes on at the door when we are seeing somebody off, and it sort of slowly tapers down. And what you saw in that clip was, of course, she was angry, but it wasn't a goodbye. There was a difference in the manner in which the interaction ended in the first conversation and the second conversations. It was very, very abrupt. How do you terminate the interactions? How frequent contact? In the first clip, the Queen mentions that they are going to have weekly meetings. So I am the Queen, I decide how often I want to meet a person who reports to me. I want to meet you on a weekly basis. And of course, something else happens and then you see things. But I mean, so those decisions are taken, those rules are made. How satisfied are you with those rules? And again, there's some discussion about how Tony Blair wants his staff to address him, and he can't negotiate that with the Queen, but initially, he has to really follow the rules. So the Queen's attendant, I'm sorry, I don't know the actual terminology for, or maybe the butler, I don't know the exact terminology for a person similar to a butler in the royal family. So somebody else who knows a better term is welcome to advise me on it. But this person tells Tony Blair and his wife how they are supposed to behave in the Queen's presence, verbally, non-verbally, all of those things. And you know, how satisfied you are with those rules will determine what happens after that. Okay. We don't have time for very much else, but I will quickly go over some of the important aspects in co-orientation. Co-orientation means orienting ourselves similarly in a similar fashion to communication rules. And this model describes how a person views an object or event and some other person at the same time. How do I view the situation? How comfortable I am? There are two important concepts in this, which are agreement. Agreement is the similarity between how a manager describes a communication rule and the way the subordinate describes the same rule. Are we on the same level? Are we on the same platform or not? And accuracy is the actual one, is being in agreement. I know what you're saying, you know what I am saying, but are we right about it? Okay, so that is, and we don't have time for the model today, but now I've given you who coined this, I've given you information on who coined the model, and I would urge you to look it up yourselves and figure out details yourselves. Some popular opinion about how communication rules should be exercised. Acknowledge the receiver's context, understand and acknowledge your own context as the sender of the message. Nobody cares how much you know unless they know how much you care. I should have that bonding. I should know that you are concerned about how I feel, and in that if I know about that, we can always negotiate the rules. There's a rule of listening, when you should listen, when you should stop talking, when you should start talking. So all of those things need to be negotiated. Match your body language, voice tone and other non-verbal behavior with your words. Keep your communication pure and simple. Again, these are some tips. I'm sure that this list is not exhaustive. You can add whatever you feel needs to be added to this list. Do not contaminate it with sarcasm, witticisms or put downs. Don't point fingers at others, don't be nasty to others, don't be negative. Repeat and review when you're negotiating rules, especially if you want rules to be very, very strictly followed. Check and ensure the accuracy and comprehension of your message, especially if it is a critical message, and walk your talk. Match your actions with your words. Ensure that there is a coherence between your intention, what you say, and how you say it. And by how we mean the non-verbal messages that are exchanged, the manner in which these messages, the order of these messages, the manner in which these messages are exchanged, all of that forms a part of the how you share your communication or how you share your messages with people who are actually going to be able to do something about them. Why do we follow these rules in a professional environment? We had discussed these things, we briefly touched upon these things in the lecture on non-verbal communication, and I'm just trying to adapt all this because all this matters a lot in a professional situation. So expanding, I'm taking the liberty of expanding the pie here. Appropriate communication between superiors and subordinates enhances cooperation. If the how is worked out, if the rules, if the manager, superior and subordinate are on the same platform, they are in agreement about what these rules mean, how they should be followed, then cooperation becomes easier. So I should know what you want me to do in a particular situation. Are you comfortable with me receiving phone calls or not? And once I get that feedback from you, I can modify my behavior in such a manner so that you are comfortable. And that sort of helps us cooperate with each other. Perceived trustworthiness and credibility of superiors and subordinates depends significantly on the coherence between non-verbal and verbal interactions of the superior and subordinate. They need to be in conjunction, they need to be coherent, they need to be on the same level, and the appropriateness of messages in any work situation. So what is considered right? It's not what is right. Everything depends on the context. the appropriateness of my messages depends on your ability or your perception of what I'm sending to you. It depends on your perception of the fitness, how well fit, how well does it gel with or connect with what is really going on. That is the appropriateness of messages, and my perception depends on what I understand of the situation and how well I think what you've sent me or the message you have coined fits in with whatever I am expecting or with the situation that it's meant to fit in. Sensitivity to and acknowledgement of explicit and non-explicit, denotative and connotative, verbal and non-verbal signals impacts the superior-subordinate relationship and the communication climate of the whole organization. You have this in place, you've got everything. Okay, and now let us discuss some things before we end today's lecture. I would like you to observe your own personal and professional interactions and list the differences in the rules you follow for each. Figure out your where you interact with people and how you negotiate these rules. I've just given you the topics. They are pretty self-explanatory. You can link them up in class with the video clip that you just saw, and find out where you follow what kind of rule and how you negotiate these rules, and list the differences in the rules you follow for each of your interactions depending on your relationship with the receiver of the messages you send out. Deliberate upon the application of the co-orientation model in your formal and informal interactions after you've had a chance to review it. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to touch upon it much, but I urge you to read up more about this and see whether it fits in. And list and discuss the verbal and non-verbal behaviors and messages that you have found to be appropriate or inappropriate, and the reasons for your perceptions regarding the appropriateness of these messages. Figure out why you think some messages are appropriate or inappropriate in different situations. What makes them appropriate? What makes them inappropriate? And you discuss these things, and today's lecture and the message that I wanted to send out through today's lecture and what I wanted to teach you about communication rules in this class will become very, very clear to you. Wish you all the best and thank you.